and welcome to part 2 of our jeans sew along. So last week you should have cut out your pattern, cut out your fabric, interfaced it, anything that needed interfacing, and now we're ready to start doing some sewing. Now, one of the things that's a dead giveaway for bad home sewn jeans is your top stitching. So top stitching is going to be really important. So if you are blessed enough to have 2 sewing machines, I would set one up for top stitching and one up for sewing. That way you don't have to keep switching your threads in and out. If you don't, then you will need to switch out your sewing thread with your top stitching thread, which is the heavier yellow colored thread that you're using. Now, I'm going to try as best I can to combine all of the top stitching together to make it a little easier for you so you don't have to switch on and off as much. But either way, you are going to have to do it. So what I'm going to do in this section today is we're going to do most of the top stitching on our pockets. So we're going to do our coin pocket, we're going to do our front pockets, and we're going to do our back pockets and attach the back yoke to the back of our pants. I hope you're ready. Let's get started. Let's go over the pieces we're going to be using today. You should have pattern piece 14, 18, 17, 12, 11, 10, 13, and 19. Now, for the pockets, for the back and our coin pocket, I want you to go ahead and fuse some interfacing to the very top so that when we're doing our top stitching, this doesn't stretch out. So the hem allowance for the big pocket is 1 inch, and the hem allowance for the coin pocket is 5/8 of an inch. So cut a strip of interfacing that measures 1 inch and 5/8 of an inch and fuse it to the very top edge of our pockets, of course on the wrong side. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and fold over that 5/8 of an inch, and I want you to press it. And then I want you to fold the raw edge until you meet the crease, and then press it again. And we're going to go to the machine and we're going to top stitch close to that edge. Okay, so I'm going to be top stitching on the top of my fabric and on the right side of my fabric instead of on the wrong side because I can feel where the edge of my fabric is, and so I just measured it out so that I can have my top stitching nicely on the right side of my fabric. I'm using a 3.5 length stitch. Okay, now I'm going to create a second row of stitching about 1/8 of an inch from the top. And you can sort of mimic jeans that you might have that you like the top stitching. You can always do that as well. Okay, so we have our 2 rows of top stitching, and now what I've done is I went ahead and stitched around my pocket 5/8 of an inch away from the raw edge so that when I'm pressing over, I know exactly where to press my pocket so that it's even all the way around. So I'm going to turn along my stitching line and I'm going to press. That way I know that the point of my pocket is going to be right in the center and that I have folded and pressed an even 5/8 of an inch all the way around my pocket. Now you're going to do the same thing for your back pockets. So I want you to press the 1 inch, and then you're going to press raw edge to the crease, and you're going to top stitch it just the way we did here, and then you're going to press and fold 5/8 of an inch all the way around your pocket. Okay, this is what your pockets should look like when you're done top stitching and then pressing under the seam allowance. So set your back pockets aside, and we're going to work with our coin pocket, and we're going to be working with our front yoke. And what you're going to do is you're going to place your pocket where your dots are. So you should have transferred markings. You had 2 big dots and then a small dot here and a small dot here. So you want to make sure that your coin pocket is between both large dots, the way you see me doing here. And then we're going to stitch this down. Now, before you do that, I want you to go ahead, if you have a serger, and finish off the raw edge of your yoke front. Okay, I went ahead and trimmed off my seam allowance to about 1/4 inch. And now before I attach this to our front yoke, I'm gonna top stitch around my pocket first, about 3/8 of an inch from the folded edge. Then I'm going to use the top stitching along the very edge to attach my pocket to the yoke. I just find that it's easier to do this step first. Now I'm going to grab my front yoke. I'm going to place my pocket between my dots, and we're going to stitch close to the edge all the way around. Okay, now that I have my pocket pinned in place, I'm going to stitch all the way around the edge of my pocket. Okay, so your coin pocket should look like this, right? And what we're going to do is we're going to put our yoke front on top of our front yoke. So what we're going to do is you're going to place it over the top of it just like this. And now if I was using a heavier denim, I would be cutting this piece out of like a cotton fabric because you're not going to see it, right? This is the yoke which covers that piece. But my denim is pretty lightweight and I like the structure around my pockets, so I just cut it out of denim. And what we're going to do is we're going to stitch this in place using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I want you to stitch across the top and then across the bottom, and then we're going to stitch close to the edge here. You can follow your serger stitching if you'd like to stitch our yoke onto our front. Okay, so I went ahead and stitched down my yokes right on both sides, as you can see here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to stitch the lining of our pocket to the front of our pant, and then we'll go ahead and attach our yoke to our pocket. So set that aside, and what we're going to do is I want you to place your lining, your pocket lining bag, right sides facing, right? So the right sides are facing each other, and we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance around the edge. Then we're going to understitch and turn this over. Now I want you to go ahead and trim this down to about 1/4 inch. Okay, so I went ahead and trimmed my seam allowance and I made some notches, some clips into the curved edge. And I'm gonna turn this over and we're going to do some understitching, right? So the seam allowance is facing the pocket, so it's to the right of my body. And I'm going to understitch along the edge, sewing only on our lining. Now we're going to put this underneath and we're going to press it on both sides. Do both fronts the same way. Once you finish your pocket lining on both fronts, we're going to go ahead and top stitch. We're going to top stitch close to the edge, and then we're going to top stitch again about 3/8 of an inch from the edge. Now we're going to top stitch again about 3/8 of an inch from the edge. Okay, so we have the top stitching done on the front of our pants, and so now what we're going to do is we're going to place this on top of our yoke. And what we're going to do first is we're going to stitch our pocket lining to our pocket all the way around and then along the bottom. And then once we do that, we're going to stitch this in place at the top and at the side. So let's go ahead and pin. Now I'm going to pin at the very top first. I'm going to make sure my notches are aligned. Just to hold this in place, I'm going to pin here. And I'm going to pin here. Turn this around. And I'm going to pin around my pocket. And now we're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance just on our pocket and our pocket lining. Now I'm going to turn this back to the right side. And I'm going to baste the top edge. And then I'm going to sew down the sides. You're going to do the other side the same way. Okay, go ahead and give it one final press, and then go ahead and serge around your pocket edges so it's nice and clean on the inside. And we're going to set these aside, and we're going to work on our yoke and back yoke. Okay, so go ahead and grab one back and one back yoke. And so you should have double notches on your pants and also on your yoke. So I want you right sides facing, okay, to pin matching those double notches, and then pin at the edge, and we're going to stitch across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then we're going to press this and we're going to do some top stitching. Okay, now go ahead and serge the edge of your seam allowance if you have a serger, or zigzag it, or you can trim it if you want to. And we're going to go ahead and press our seam allowance up towards our yoke, and then we're going to do 2 rows of top stitching. Okay, we're going to top stitch close to the edge, okay? And then we're going to top stitch again 3/8 of an inch from the seam that we see here. And then we're going to top stitch again. You're gonna do that for both sides. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and pin our pockets in place. So we're gonna do one at a time. And you should have 2 dots for your pockets. Actually, you should have 3 dots on your back. You should have a dot here, and then you should have one up here. This is where your belt loop, one of the belt loops, is going to be attached. But you should have 2 large dots here, and that's where you're going to position your pocket. You're going to place it between those dots, and you're going to pin here, and then here at the center, and we're going to attach it the same way that we did our coin pocket. So go ahead and stitch close to the edge all the way around, and then 3/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around. Okay, once you're done attaching your back pockets, we're done for the day. And we're going to continue next week by sewing together our center back and then attaching front to back and also doing our fly front zipper. All right guys, go ahead and finish all of your top stitching, finish your front and back pockets, and I will see you next week. Peace.